Lucia felt a chill down her spine. She took a deep breath before responding. Yes, it's necessary. Think about it. As the boss of a company, it's only right for me to meet with the executives. A wise man in power doesn't need to do this, Dalen replied. Lucia thought, is Dalen saying I'm useless? Then she had an idea that made her face go red. That, if you agree to let me go, we can do that tonight, and I'll cooperate, Lucia said in a low voice. Her face became even redder. An intriguing offer. Dalen was not moved, because if he wanted it, Lucia wouldn't be able to fight back. Lucia knew it was true, but she could no longer hold it in. She said unhappily, Dalen, I'm telling you my plans in advance. What else do you want? What do you think? Lucia gritted her teeth. In the end, she thought of a different plan. Actually, it's about Tracy. She wants to remarry Mark, and I want to help. Isn't it fun to bother people? Lucia beamed. When Lucia said this, Dalen was in a good mood. Where is the party? He asked. It's at Tracy's villa in the outskirts of town. What do you think? Should I go? Lucia thought that Dalen's tone had relaxed, so she immediately took the opportunity to ask him. Her tone was a little bit coquettish. Hearing that, Dalen finally said, Fine. Yay! Lucia smiled happily. Then she realized that she had still not hung up, so she said, Sorry, I forgot to hang up. Lucia, Cole, and Mark sat in the back of the car with a driver and an assistant in front of them. Mark was dressed neatly and wore a tie. He did not look like he was going to a party. He looked like he was going for a meeting. Lucia and Cole were like two kids curled up in their seats. Mr. Leland, why don't you change your clothes? We're just relaxing, Lucia said. These are the only kind of clothes I own, Mark said. Lucia and Cole felt an awkward silence descend. Mr. Leland, don't you find it strange that there are only 3 of us at this gathering? Lucia asked again. Yes, I find it strange, Mark replied. So why didn't you ask about it? Lucia's curiosity surfaced. I'm a lawyer. I wait for the facts before I judge, Mark said calmly. That was indeed the case. Other than Dalen, the most astute person was a lawyer. They arrived at a suburb that Lucia had never been to before. After entering the luxurious villa, she was overwhelmed. Since it was located in the outskirts, there were citrus trees and flowers everywhere, making it very comfortable and suitable for entertainment. In the darkness of the night, the small lights were like luminous pearls. There were all kinds of colorful lights wrapped around the branches of the trees. It was mesmerizing. Lucia whimsically said, When I go home, I want to have lights wrapped around the trees at the mansion. They look so nice. Tracy immediately came out to greet them. She was dressed up in a sexy and beautiful outfit. Her delicate makeup made her look like she had just stepped off a television set. Lucia couldn't believe her eyes as she looked at Tracy. She just didn't know why Mark wanted to divorce her. When they entered the house, Lucia, who was walking at the back, whispered to Mark, Do you want to remarry her? Never thought about it, Mark responded. Did Tracy do something wrong to you that caused you to never forgive her? Let me guess. What's so serious between husband and wife? An affair? Lucia gasped. Mark remained indifferent as he looked ahead. Mrs. Patrick, you should worry about your own marriage. Me? What do I have to worry about? Lucia asked curiously, but her hand was pulled by Cole before Mark could respond. What are you doing? Then she followed Cole's line of sight. She finally understood what Mark was implying. Lucia never expected to meet Axel here. Whenever she had run into Axel in the past, Lucia was definitely overjoyed. She loved to rush up immediately and talk to him happily. But now, she stood there in a daze and didn't dare to move forward. She was afraid that Dalen would be upset. What? Why aren't you greeting your good friend? It was Mark's turn to fight back. After saying that, he did not linger and went farther into the house. After Mark left, Cole also left. Before Lucia could stop Cole, she saw Axel walking over. There was a warm smile on his face. He stood in front of her and said, "Looks like you like bumping into me unexpectedly." "You're here for the party too? Tracy invited you?" Lucia asked. "Tracy invited some of my friends. I was there when the call came, so we came together." Lucia looked at the men and women walking in and out of the living room with glasses in their hands. She was cursing that idiot Tracy in her mind. How could she be so stupid? "Why do I have a feeling that you're not as happy to see me here?" Axel asked. "Huh? How could that be? Of course not," Lucia immediately said. She had no objections to Axel. She was just afraid of Dalen. "I'm just joking. Don't be so nervous," Axel smiled. "I'm not nervous." Lucia forced a laugh. Far away from the hustle and bustle of the living room, Tracy walked to a quiet place. She took out a bottle of transparent medicine and said to her assistant, "Take the chance when Mark isn't paying attention to drop this into his cup." "What is this?" The assistant was nervous. "What are you thinking? Do you think I want to kill him? What's there to be afraid of?" Tracy's assistant still wasn't very sure of her intentions, but knew better than to question her. There were plenty of people who could not bear to have a divorce and would rather kill each other than see each other happy. "You must be careful. Don't let anyone see it, especially Mark." "All right." There were guests standing and sitting in the living room. Lucia chose to sit down because Mark also sat down. She thought she might be safer with Mark here. When Lucia raised her head and looked into Mark's eyes, the smile in his eyes was very obvious. He seemed to be saying that he would very willingly rat her out to Dalen. Lucia had a big headache. Why did she always bump into Axel when she was out partying? And why did Dalen misunderstand her intentions whenever she came into contact with Axel? Lucia sighed resentfully in her heart. Dalen definitely thought that she liked Axel. When Axel sat down on the sofa, Lucia was so scared that she immediately stood up. Because of the abrupt movement, the people sitting on the sofa looked at her in confusion. "I'm just going to the washroom," Lucia chuckled. She turned red and left quickly. Meanwhile, Dalen's car was on the road. A black armored luxury car with the bodyguard's car following behind. The atmosphere inside the car was so cold that it made Spencer and the driver shiver. When Dalen found out that Axel was going to the same party Lucia was attending, he couldn't sit still. He immediately called for his car. Dalen's voice was low and cold as he asked Spencer, "Did you find out why he was there?" "I think he's close with a star from one of Tracy's shows. Coincidentally, they went to the party together. Axel probably didn't know that Lucia would be there. Hearing what Mark said, the two of them were both very surprised." Dalen's expression became even uglier and more terrifying. Did this mean that the two of them were fated to meet? The veins on Dalen's forehead were about to twist. He should just lock Lucia up in the mansion. At the party, Lucia came out of the bathroom. When she came out, she admired the design of the villa. It seemed to have both an antique and modern style. There were many frosted glass doors. When Lucia returned to the sofa, she sat down and drank from the cup of water in front of her. She said to Cole, "Let's go explore. I think the design here is quite interesting." "Sure. I was going to wait for you to come back and take a look," Cole said. Then the two of them stood up and wandered off. While looking, Lucia remembered and asked, "Did you tour that house?" "Yeah, it was all right. 1 room, 1 bath. I'll move in on the 1st of the month," Cole explained. "Could there be ghosts?" Lucia teased. Cole felt goosebumps all over his body. "Can you not speak nonsense? How will I sleep alone at night?" Since when are you so superstitious? Lucia said. I'm not. Oh, yeah. Could you help me on the day I move? Cole changed the subject. Nope. Lucia rejected him flatly. Why? Cole could not believe it. You don't have a room for me? In case I don't have a place to stay one day, I still want to be able to squeeze in at your place, Lucia said. We're not going to squeeze in with me. Is there no place for you in that mansion of yours? You might not know this, but other than the master bedroom, all the other rooms have been sealed, so it's locked. Ugh, why do I feel so hot? Lucia was slightly agitated. There's sweat on your forehead and your face is red. Cole felt her forehead. Do you have a fever? You seem to be feverish. Cole touched his own forehead and then Lucia's. He was surprised. It really does seem to be getting hot. I'm hot. Can you faint from fever? I'll go to the bathroom to wash my face. Lucia turned around and headed for the bathroom. I'll go with you, Cole offered. No need, just wait around the corner. Lucia went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. She even drank a few mouthfuls of cold water. The heat in her body dropped slightly, but soon after, Lucia felt a little dizzy. Heavens, could it really be a fever? After drinking more cold water, the scorching heat became even more unbearable. She could feel a hot current running through her body. Her face flushed red and she could not help but groan. Dalen. What could she do? She was so hot. Lucia didn't know what was wrong with her, but she wanted to call Dalen. Luckily, Dalen had just gotten out of the car. When he saw Lucia's call, he answered it directly. Have you had enough fun? Dalen, I feel so sick, Lucia moaned. Where do you feel sick? Dalen's heart tightened. I'm so hot. You... Come quickly. Lucia's breathing became even more ragged. Dalen's face immediately darkened, but before he could say anything, he heard a bang. A corner of the house exploded in front of him, followed by the collapse of the rest of the house. The buzzing sound in Dalen's ears was like thorns piercing his heart. Lucia, who was on the phone, didn't know what was going on. She felt the whole house shake. Then she was suddenly grabbed and carried through the wrecked house. Lucia had just steadied herself when she saw the house collapse in front of her. She didn't have time to care about the fact that she was being carried by Axel. Lucia heard someone screaming in panic. Is this an earthquake? She asked. Hurry up! Axel ran backwards while holding Lucia. Lucia wasn't feeling well, but she couldn't care less now. She didn't even know what had happened. Was it a dream? Why is the house collapsing? Lucia didn't even know where she was before she was pushed into a garage by Axel. The aluminum door closed. As soon as the door closed, a crashing sound came from outside, followed by a shake of the warehouse. Ah! Lucia fell back. Axel caught her, and both of them fell to the ground. Lucia only felt a dull pain in her head before her vision turned black and she fainted. Seeing that Lucia had fainted, Axel immediately shook her and called out, Lucia? Lucia? Thinking that she had fainted from the fall. But why was her body so hot? Her face was hot. The rumbling outside stopped. It was safe to go out now. However, when Axel tried to open the aluminum door, the lock was stuck. He smacked the door hard. Useless. Outside, Dalen's heart stopped. His eyes were red as he looked for Lucia's figure in the ruins. He even used his hands to crazily dig through the ruined tables and chairs. Lucia! Lucia! He yelled. The other bodyguards didn't dare to disrupt him. Spencer felt that Dalen had lost his mind, but he couldn't panic. He immediately called the police and called an ambulance. After that, he went to look for Lucia with Dalen. The first people to climb out from the wreckage were Mark and Tracy. Both of them were covered in dust. They couldn't get out of the house, so they hid under a table. To be exact, Tracy was pushed under the table by Mark, who had reacted very quickly. Otherwise, she would be buried. Other celebrities also climbed out, one after another. Dalen just didn't see Lucia. He went forward and grabbed Mark's collar. "Where is she?" Mark was almost suffocated by the force of Dalen's grip. "Sorry, it happened so suddenly. I didn't see her." "Find her! If you can't find her, I want all of you to die with me!" Dalen roared like a madman. His black eyes were shockingly intense. No one doubted his words. In the garage, Lucia was finally woken up by the heat in her body. "Lucia, you're awake? Thank goodness." Axel touched her face and couldn't hide the joy in his eyes. Lucia's breathing quickened. "Axel, where are we?" "Tracy's garage. We can't leave it for the time being, so we'll have to wait for someone outside to open the lock," Axel explained. Lucia grumbled in distress. "What's wrong? Are you uncomfortable?" Axel hurriedly asked. The temperature in her body hadn't decreased at all. "I don't feel so well." Lucia wanted water, hoping to touch something cooler. Axel saw Lucia's reaction and immediately understood. He was shocked. How could this happen? "Lucia, what did you eat?" Logically speaking, she shouldn't be in any danger here. Unless someone targeted her. However, he couldn't think of anyone who would want to harm Lucia. Lucia said with great difficulty, "No, I don't know." "You've been drugged," Axel told her. What? Lucia, who was confused, instantly woke up a bit. What was going on? Axel felt his throat become dry and hoarse. He asked, "Do you want me to help you? Do you know who I am?" Lucia seemed to be shocked by his question, to the point that her head was trembling. She raised her eyes that were watery from the heat. Axel's face was blurry and clear in her vision. Lucia held Axel's clothes tightly. It was as if she was saying how much she needed him. Axel was completely mesmerized by her. He was so deeply engrossed in those two eyes that were filled with desire. How could he not like Lucia? He had been attracted to her since the first time he met her, but he hadn't known that Lucia was someone Dalen wanted. Axel knew what he had lost. He also knew that he no longer had the right to love her, but he couldn't help it. He clearly knew that she couldn't possibly be with him, but there were too many fantasies in his heart. Fantasies of her always by his side, never leaving him. However, when he returned to reality, he would suffer the pain of not having Lucia by his side. Therefore, at this very moment, the temptation was too great for him. He even hoped that no one would come to their rescue, allowing them to remain here until they died. Axel couldn't hold it back anymore, especially since he knew Lucia needed someone to help her. His body and heart were both restless. He lowered his face. Dalen and his people were still looking for Lucia. The collapsed concrete beams, the broken pieces of the windows, and the chaotic scene made them feel a chill in their hearts. The more time passed, the worse Dalen's expression became. It was no longer possible to describe his ashen face. His two hands were covered in blood from digging through the fallen remains. It was a shocking sight to behold. When Spencer flipped over the sofa in the corner, he was stunned. "There's someone here!" Dalen immediately went over and pulled out the person who was buried under the sofa. However, he found that it wasn't Lucia, but Cole. Since Cole was here, that meant Lucia shouldn't be too far away. Dalen immediately sank down on the ground with his hands full of concrete and nails. He had to find Lucia. Spencer checked for Cole's breathing. There was nothing. Spencer frowned and immediately started CPR. He pressed his hands against Cole's chest. Hopefully, he would be able to survive. After Spencer had pressed down about a dozen times, Cole coughed violently and breathed heavily. Cole felt as if he was about to die. "Are you okay?" Spencer asked. Cole raised his head and saw Spencer. Looking around, he saw the ruins of the villa and remembered what had happened. And those people who kept digging with their hands. He even saw Dalen, who was coming towards him with a fury in his eyes. "Where is she?" Dalen's eyes were wild. Cole was stunned. "I'm asking you, where is she?" Cole was so upset that his whole body trembled. Tears immediately welled up in his eyes. He was afraid that something bad had happened to Lucia. "You can't find Lucia? How could that be? She said she was hot, so she went to the bathroom." Just as he finished speaking, Tracy pointed and said, "The washroom's over there." Meanwhile, just when Axel was about to press his lips on Lucia's, she used all of her strength and pushed him off of her. Axel was shocked. "Lucia!" Lucia crawled away. She was still determined to stay away from Axel. She reached the side and hid in a corner. Because of the effects of the drugs, her body was trembling nonstop. She grit her teeth and bit her lips to clear her mind. When Axel saw how she was enduring the pain, sadness flashed across his eyes and his heart ached for her. "Lucia, do you hate me so much? I thought you liked me." Axel knew everything, but he pretended that he didn't know anything. At this moment, Lucia was fighting against the poisonous effects as she bitterly said, "Axel, could you please stay away? At the very least, it won't be so uncomfortable." Tears fell from Lucia's eyes. She was afraid that she would lose control more and more. Lucia didn't understand her current situation. Didn't she like Axel? Didn't she dream of marrying Axel? Why didn't she want to have anything to do with him now? It wasn't like she had anything better to do. She was drugged and trapped. However, Lucia thought this in her mind and didn't feel the urge to act. "You fainted just now and immediately woke up. I could get your heart racing." Lucia's brain had turned weak. Was Axel seducing her? "Axel, I can't. I already have married. You can't do that." Lucia pressed close to the cold of the aluminum siding, but she felt it start to heat up, blurring her vision. You were tormenting yourself. Axel could not bear to see her like this. He would rather do something for Lucia. Lucia dodging his advances also made his heart ache. "No matter what you want to do, no one will know, and I won't tell my brother," Axel promised. Lucia's long eyelashes fluttered like the wings of a frightened butterfly as she weakly chanted, "Dalen." Axel inched closer. "They might need some time to find us. Can you really bear the tension between us? Because I can't." Lucia's body trembled. Tears rolled down the corners of her eyes. "Axel, I promised him that I would be with him for the first time." Lucia bit her lips as she finished speaking. When Axel heard what Lucia said, surprise and joy flashed across his eyes. "How is this possible? You've been married so long." Lucia didn't say anything. She just wanted to let Axel know her mind. A lot had happened between Lucia and Dalen before, but never to the point where she could completely call herself Dalen's. Lucia couldn't help but think about the night that had been keeping her awake since the past few days. Being the naive girl she was, she thought this was it. She was writhing with pleasure when Dalen touched her between her legs the other night, and she thought they had done it, only to have realized that she was wrong. She was Dalen's wife, and being with Dalen was all she wanted at this moment. She had promised to be with him tonight. Why did this happen? Why was she drugged? Under the torment of the drug, Lucia, who had always been strong, became extremely weak. The people outside did not find Lucia in the bathroom, not even a piece of her clothing. Even if she was buried, they would have found her by now. For the first time, Dalen felt depressed. Why couldn't he find her? Where is she? Spencer looked at Dalen frozen in place, as if he was a lifeless sculpture. His entire body was so tense that it seemed as if he would explode in the next second. His hands were dripping blood, and he didn't feel it at all. Spencer looked around and suddenly thought of something. He walked up and said, "Mr. Patrick, Axel is also not here." Dalen's black eyes slightly twitched. "What are you trying to say?" "I think perhaps the young madam and Axel might not be here. Otherwise, we would have found them." Spencer spoke with his head held high. Had Axel and Lucia run away together? How else could he explain the current situation? Everyone else was accounted for. It was better than Lucia being buried alive. Dalen immediately thought of the phone call that Lucia had made to him before the accident. Her voice was as weak as a petal in winter frost. "Which one of you drugged her?" Tracy's expression changed as soon as the words came out of his mouth. Mark, who was beside her, saw it. He could still see the changes in his ex-wife's expression. Frowning, he said, "You better tell the truth. What exactly happened?" Tracy's expression turned even more flushed. She could not remain calm after such a serious matter. When Dalen looked at her, Tracy trembled and said, I only drugged you, Mark. I didn't do anything else." "You drugged me?" Mark's expression turned cold. Tracy trembled. "Yes, but I didn't drug Lucia. Why would I drug her? I just wanted to force you to give in. How would I know she drank some? I didn't know at all." Tracy was on the verge of tears. In other words, the drug was already taken, and Mark didn't drink it, but Lucia did. If he had, Mark wouldn't be standing here with his usual expression. Hearing that, Cole immediately pointed at Tracy and scolded her. "Are you crazy? What drug did you use? No wonder Lucia kept saying it was hot when we went upstairs." It turned out that Lucia's fever wasn't a fever, but a drug. At that time, Cole was just about to go to the washroom to help Lucia when he heard a loud sound from the house. He thought it was an earthquake, so he quickly hid under the sofa and didn't remember anything after that. Dalen said, "She better be okay, or else I will burn your bones and scatter your ashes." In the garage, Lucia pressed herself against the aluminum, her face completely white. Waves of heat flowed through her. The desire of her heart was so strong. Lucia clenched her teeth and broke down inside. "Dalen, if you can't find me, then I'll find someone else. Don't blame me when the time comes." Lucia's body spasmed once again. Axel went up to her and laid her gently on the ground. His expression was calm, as if he didn't care about anything else. He just stared at Lucia. "Axel?" Lucia whispered. "Let me help you." When Lucia heard these words, she tried her best to restrain herself. She was going to wait for Dalen. She should wait, and Dalen would appear. But Axel seemed determined to do this, and she couldn't bear to stop herself. "Lucia, what I regret the most is that I didn't take you back on the day of your wedding. Sorry. I hope from this moment on that you belong to me." Axel finished his sentence gently and was about to take action. "Axel!" Lucia protested, but her body was longing for Axel's touch. After several hours, Lucia could no longer tell what was going on. Lying on her back, tears rolled down the corners of her eyes. She couldn't wait for Dalen anymore. What was she doing? Why was she doing this? She felt faint. Before she fainted, she whispered, "Dalen." When the door of the garage finally opened, the rescuers saw Lucia leaning in the arms of Axel, who was also disheveled. His neck was full of wounds, and there was even dried blood on the ground. Lucia slept soundly in Axel's arms. Her face was pale, and she'd lost the abnormal redness that came from the drug. Dalen's eyes were bloodshot, and his face was twisted and ferocious. He stepped forward and carried Lucia out. At the same time, he kicked Axel fiercely. Axel immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. Axel frowned, staring up at Dalen, who seemed as if he would strike out at any moment. He allowed the blood to flow freely from the corner of his mouth. "Did you touch her?" Dalen's voice sounded as if it was torn apart. "Do you need to ask?" Axel asked, instead of answering. Dalen's face was expressionless. The more expressionless Dalen was, the more terrifying he was. The people watching silently retreated, afraid that Dalen would lash out at them. Even Spencer didn't dare to say a word at this moment. Lucia, who was in a deep slumber, moved uneasily. Dalen was pulled back to his senses by the wiggling of the woman in his embrace. If it wasn't for Lucia's wiggling, he might have killed Axel then and there. Then Dalen hugged Lucia tightly and left. Lucia woke up in the car. She thought she was still in the garage, that the person holding her was still Axel. "Axel, it's very cold." After she said that, she felt the body next to her stiffen. Only now did Lucia realize that something was wrong. She pulled her body out of Dalen's embrace and looked at his eyes. Her heart was trembling. His eyes were unfathomably calm, like a deep pool in the middle of a barren wasteland. Not a single ripple could be seen, but it caused chills to run down her spine. Why did he become like this? Weren't they just talking about what they were going to do that very evening? Why did this happen? Lucia no longer dared to look into Dalen's eyes. She didn't even have the courage to ask Dalen. She already knew that she was drugged, and something happened between her and Axel that shouldn't have happened. The pain on her body and the mess on her clothes should make it very clear, right? Lucia turned around and looked out the window. She wanted to jump out of the car. The car drove all the way back to the mansion, and on the way, the tension was so stifling that it was hard to breathe. No one spoke. After the car stopped, Lucia prepared to support her weak body as she got out of the car. However, she was picked up by Dalen. Lucia fell into Dalen's embrace. Her eyes were filled with tears. He was still silent. After returning to her room, Lucia went straight into the bathroom. However, she was stopped by Dalen. "Let the doctor see if you are injured." I'm not hurt. I want to take a bath." Lucia lowered her head and pulled back his arm. She went into the bathroom, and she didn't come out. Dalen stood outside the bathroom, doing nothing. The expression on his face was so intense that it was suffocating. Lucia looked at herself in the mirror, and when she saw the wound on her neck, she wanted to cry. She was afraid that Dalen would hear her, so she immediately covered her mouth with her hands. Tears fell from her eyes and slid between her fingers. While crying, Lucia turned on the shower and stood under it. She kept cleaning every part of her body and rubbed her neck until it was red. While she was carefully cleaning her body, she found a fresh wound. As soon as she touched it, she felt a sharp pain. She hadn't noticed she was bleeding. At the time, she had already collapsed and fainted. Who should Lucia hate? Axel or herself? Was there any use in thinking about this now? She couldn't go back to the time before the villa. Lucia spent a long time in the bathroom. She didn't want to go out. She wanted to stay there forever. She didn't want to face Dalen. Lucia, who was still in a trance, was suddenly startled, and her body started trembling. "How much longer do you need to wash?" Dalen turned off the water, and a white towel wrapped around her. After drying her off, Dalen took a nightgown and wrapped it around her. Lucia fell into the crook of his arm and was carried out. When she was put on the bed, she choked with sobs and said, "Dalen, let's get a divorce." Because of him? Dalen's eyes were cold and sinister. Lucia's lips moved, but no sound came out. Dalen persisted. "You want to be with him, now that you have gotten what you wanted?" Lucia shivered all over when she heard Dalen's calm voice. It was as if Dalen had just returned from hell. "No matter what you do, you will stay with me in the mansion," Dalen said, as he turned away. Tears flowed from the corners of Lucia's eyes, and they dripped down like pearls. No matter how hard she tried, they wouldn't stop. She wanted to tell Dalen how he had misunderstood her. She didn't want anything from Axel. All she could think about at this moment was him. But no words came out of her mouth. Her heart was silently collapsing. Lucia knew that Dalen had misunderstood. She brought up divorce because she could no longer stay here proudly. She wasn't going with Axel. Lucia didn't know when she fell asleep, but she had slept soundly, and when she woke up, the sky was still dark. There was no one by her side. The bed next to her was cool to the touch and smooth. Dalen had not slept here. Did he think she was not clean? So he didn't want to sleep with her? The room was so quiet that only she could hear the silence. Lucia felt her world turning cold, and her body chilled. She was muddle-headed when she heard someone knocking on her door. Lucia opened her eyes. It was already dawn. She felt that it had just been dark a moment ago. How could it be dawn so soon? In the blink of an eye. It was John who came in. "What's wrong?" Lucia asked. "I thought you'd be awake by now. I assumed you were hungry, so I asked the kitchen to prepare some food," John said. Lucia thought about it and asked, "Can you get me a new room?" "Why?" John was puzzled. "So that Dalen can sleep here. I can sleep in the same room as before." "Your old room. Mr. Patrick slept there last night." Lucia was slightly stunned and repeated in disbelief, "Dalen slept next door?" "Yes." Lucia lowered her head and did not speak. Her face was filled with confusion. Her small hands gripped the quilt tightly. "Then I'll tell them to bring your breakfast in," John said after an awkward silence. "No need, I'll eat downstairs." Lucia lifted her blanket and got off the bed. John didn't say anything as she left the room. After she left, John's face filled with worry. What should he do? Were the two of them about to separate? The two of them clearly matched each other so well. Although Dalen was difficult at times, everyone could see how much he cared about Lucia. And that time, when Lucia saw Mr. Patrick making the cake in the kitchen, she was so shocked that she almost fainted. Forget about someone like Mr. Patrick, who is a high and mighty person. Even the husbands of normal families wouldn't do such a thing. At most, they might go to the store and buy a cake. But if Lucia really did something wrong, Mr. Patrick usually gave her a hard time for a bit, and then it would be okay, right? However, John remembered that when he saw Mr. Patrick's expression when he came down from the stairs in the morning, he had never seen him so upset. He didn't even go to the dining room for breakfast. He left immediately. Even Edward didn't dare to step forward. "Mrs. Patrick is awake?" Edward walked over and asked. "She's awake, but when I saw the young lady's face, I felt bad for disturbing her," John said. In the mansion, before Dalen got married, the rooms were always filled with people coming in and out. Later, with Lucia, Edward couldn't enter the main bedroom because it was assigned to John. Therefore, since Edward didn't know about Lucia's current condition, he could only ask John. Before John could say anything else, Lucia arrived downstairs. "Morning, young madam," Edward greeted. Lucia directly entered the dining room as if she did not hear him. "You see?" John asked, lowering his voice. "I have never seen Mr. Patrick like that in the morning, but I have never seen Mrs. Patrick like this either. It is as if their entire bodies have become lifeless. What exactly happened?" John would rather Mr. and Mrs. Patrick have a little fight and then make up. How wonderful it was. But why did it seem so serious this time? Edward did not speak. Of course he saw Mr. Patrick's appearance that morning. But what could a servant do to console a boss? "How about we go and ask Spencer?" John suggested. I don't think that's a good idea, Edward said. Why? What would we ask? Edward questioned. John thought on the question but didn't reply. Edward continued. What if what is happening between them is something they don't want others to know? If that's the case, Spencer would never tell you. John was at a loss for words. Finally, he said, Then what should we do? I can't just watch the young lady soaking and do nothing, can I? Edward sighed and said more calmly than John, Let's see how it goes. When the two of them walked back into the dining room, they were stunned. Lucia was crying as she ate her breakfast. Lucia's eyes were flowing. She returned to her room after finishing her meal. Still no Dalen. She went back to bed and fell into a daze when she couldn't sleep. Then she waited for lunch. When John went to her room to call for lunch, he saw Lucia leaning on her bed in a daze and couldn't help but advise, Madame, although I don't know what happened, it's obvious that you are feeling sad and Mr. Patrick is feeling sad. It is normal for couples to quarrel. Mr. Patrick will surely make you a cake like he did in the past. So please, don't be too sad. Lucia turned around and looked at John, asking, How do you know I'm sad? John didn't know how to answer. He cut my heart out, Lucia said. She wanted to laugh, but there were tears in her eyes. John didn't understand the meaning behind her words, but he could see Lucia's pain. I'm going down to eat. Without further discussion, Lucia got off the bed. She headed straight for the dining room. The mansion was very large, and even the corridors were very long. There was complete silence except for her footsteps, unhurried. Why did she say her heart had been cut out? Who cut it out? Lucia knew it was Dalen. She had never thought that she would be able to love Dalen. In any case, Dalen was very difficult, but his presence was so strong that she couldn't ignore it. After what happened, she knew that she had given her heart to Dalen. She finally knew that she had no feelings for Axel. She had gradually forgotten Axel when she was unable to escape Dalen's control. But in the end, this happened. Now, was she supposed to stay by Dalen's side for the rest of her life? Lucia wondered if she was cheating on the marriage contract. She consistently refused Dalen, and then gave her precious first time so easily to Axel. Dalen. Why didn't he yell at her? Lucia sat down at the dining table and ate what had once been delicious but now tasted like wax. Her favorite thing used to be coming to the dining table, because there were so many kinds of food waiting for her. But now, she couldn't appreciate the delicacy anymore. Food didn't tempt her at all. Lucia remembered the last time she was angry and refused to eat. It was Dalen who made her favorite pasta in the kitchen. If Lucia didn't eat now, what would she do? Dalen didn't come home that day, and he didn't come back during the evening either. Lucia's phone had gone missing when the villa collapsed, so she couldn't even wait for Dalen's call. But what did she expect? Did she expect that Dalen would treat her like he treated her before? Lucia didn't dare to take the initiative to call Dalen. She felt like she had done something irreversible. Later, John came to her room for dinner and asked, Lucia, madame, I'm afraid Mr. Patrick won't be back for dinner. Why don't you eat first? There will be food for Mr. Patrick in the kitchen. Lucia was conflicted. She was afraid of meeting Dalen, but she also hoped that he would come back. Lucia returned to her room after having dinner, but she woke up in the middle of the night. The curtains were undrawn and moonlight flooded in. She stared at the moon in the sky for a long time before finally sitting up in bed. After she opened the door, the night watchman immediately came over. Young madam, what's the matter? Lucia glanced at the room next to hers and asked, Is Dalen back yet? Mr. Patrick hasn't returned yet. Lucia's heart immediately became flushed. She was abandoned, left alone. But what else could she do? Did she really want to be Dalen's wife? Lucia returned to her room without a word and closed the door. She got into bed but didn't lie down. She just sat down and buried her face in her knees. Lucia didn't sleep the rest of the night. During the night, Spencer walked through the corridor. The soles of his leather shoes squeaked on the hard granite surface, which was firm and cold. The light in the lounge was off, but Spencer knocked on the door and went in. Inside, Dalen sat on the sofa and smoked. There were a lot of cigarette butts in the ashtray. Both of his hands were wrapped in gauze. If he were any ordinary person, he wouldn't be able to move. The doctor said there was no major injury, but attention should be paid to avoid infection. Dalen's face became clear in the darkness, but his expression was in the shadows. "Mr. Patrick, you haven't slept for 2 days and 2 nights, Spencer said. "Did she cause any trouble?" Dalen's voice came through the smoke, with no emotion. "No. According to the steward, the young lady ate 3 meals a day on time and returned to her room after finishing her meal. Nothing else." "She knows that resistance is useless," Dalen said coldly. "She really wants to be with Axel, but I'll never allow it. If he couldn't have her, no one could." Dalen knew that Lucia was drugged, but she probably hoped for it anyways, right? He knew that he'd only married Lucia by forcing her to marry him. Lucia actually wanted to marry Axel. Her heart was not with him. Even if he saved her, she would call out Axel's name. And she wants to divorce him. Never. Dalen's heart was twisted in pain and fury. "What about what I told you to look into?" Dalen's eyes were extremely cold in the dim light. Dalen had asked, but Spencer could only say, "The place where the villa was blown up has been searched for explosives. The blast was just enough to blow up the mansion, but no one was killed. It seems very strange. Mr. Patrick, could it be that someone was sending a warning?" Dalen didn't say anything to Spencer. He wondered if the whole thing was connected. Axel, drug, explosives. After checking on Axel, he found nothing suspicious. Tracy was the one who tried to drug Mark, but Lucia drank it accidentally. So who buried the explosives? A knock on the door interrupted his train of thought. Dalen's eyes were as cold as ice. The bodyguard's voice came from outside. "Mr. Patrick, Robert is here to see you." Spencer said coldly, "It's almost 4 in the morning. I'm afraid we haven't slept all night. Sir, do you want to see him?" Dalen didn't say anything, but Spencer understood. He turned around and left the lounge. After a while, Robert came in. He somehow looked old and frail. "Uncle, sit." Dalen sat on the sofa and looked at him lazily. His calm tone did not reveal anything. Robert sat on the opposite sofa. He sat down, but he did not relax. "I came to check in, but I didn't expect you to be awake. Although a young man's body is strong, you can't stay awake forever," Robert said. "You came over just for fun, then?" Dalen asked coldly. "I was unable to contact Axel, so I wanted to ask if you had seen him. I know what kind of party he and his friends were going to. It looks like Lucia was there too. I was going to ask Lucia if she had seen him, but felt that it wasn't right, so I came over to ask you. Since you already know about all this, you must also know about the explosion at the villa, right?" Dalen looked at him with his sharp black eyes. "I know. I've already looked into it, but I couldn't find anything. What do you think?" Robert's expression was very serious. "You think this has something to do with me? You wouldn't think that I was the one who caused Axel's disappearance, right?" Dalen asked expressionlessly. "Of course I don't think so. He's practically your brother, and you wouldn't do that to him." Robert came only to see Dalen's attitude, but Dalen gave nothing away. He'd already asked every single survivor from the villa and found that no one knew where Axel was. It sounded like Axel was buried alive. But was Robert 100% trusting of Dalen? Of course not. However, this conversation left him with no clues as to what was going on. "Uncle, you should go back and rest. Be easy on your body," Dalen said emotionlessly. Robert sighed. "Fine, but your aunt is extremely worried. I said that I would find him and be back in 2 days, but I've found nothing. I can't go home empty-handed." "Dalen, if you know anything, you must tell me," Robert said desperately. "Of course," Dalen replied. Robert did not linger and left helplessly. Dalen's expression immediately turned dark, and his eyes became cold without any trace of humanity. Like a brother? How could he care about his uncle's son? What a joke. After Robert went out, Spencer came in. "Is he dead?" Dalen asked coldly. The air was still and eerie. "No. Sir, do you want to see him?" Spencer asked. Dalen's eyes darkened. "Robert is probably waiting for me to leave so he can follow me." "Then we won't go?" "Of course we will." Spencer didn't understand. "We'll let him know that Axel is with me, but that he won't be able to see anyone. Sometimes what the mind imagines is even more disturbing than actually seeing," Dalen said maliciously. Dalen stood up and left the house. Not long after his car had left, they saw the car that was following them. It wasn't Robert's car, but the person inside must be Robert. Robert was indeed very smart. Dalen's cold face did not have the slightest expression. Even when they arrived and he saw Axel, who was being tortured, he did not show any expression. When Axel saw Dalen, even though he knew that his life was in Dalen's hands, he did not show any signs of panic. However, as usual, when he saw Dalen, he called out, "Brother, you touched her. You deserve nothing else but to die," Dalen said sinisterly. "I know I shouldn't have, but she was in so much pain. She's been wanting me all this time, and she wanted me to help her. Brother, it's not like you don't know that I like Lucia, so I couldn't hold it back. Brother, can you help us? Lucia and I are destined. She was not sincere when she married you." Axel suddenly cried out in pain. Dalen ruthlessly stepped on and crushed the wound on his leg. It was like a cigarette butt being crushed on the ground. Axel's face was pale, including his lips, and beads of sweat rolled down his face. "Love each other. You think I'd grant you that request?" A cruel smile hung on Dalen's face. He exerted more force onto Axel's leg, and the sound of bones cracking could be heard. Axel was in so much pain that the veins in his neck bulged. "I can kill you with a single blow." Dalen was terrifyingly cruel. His black eyes were filled with fury. "No, you don't dare let me die. If you wanted to kill me, you would have already done so." Dalen's eyes froze for a second. "You're afraid of killing me. Lucia will hate you." Axel gasped for breath, struggling to say each word. A ruthless look appeared on Dalen's face as he kicked Axel again. Axel hit the wall behind him and spit out a mouthful of blood. Dalen looked at him without any expression. "Then you better enjoy living a life worse than death." Then he turned and left. The expression on his face never changed at all. There was only calculation. Dalen knew Axel was right. He didn't dare to kill him because of Lucia. He didn't know that he had become so soft for Lucia. It was this sorry state that made him so irritable, yet he could do nothing about it. Dalen suddenly laughed again, but his laugh was very scary. Even if he couldn't kill him, he would make Robert's family suffer. They want to run away unscathed after provoking me? Never. Dalen's guard naturally realized that Robert's car had followed them all the way here, but they didn't care and just left. Because even if Robert guessed what they were doing, he wouldn't be able to see the whole story. That was the most torturous part. After Dalen's main force left, Robert got out of the car and tried to get close to the place where Axel was being held captive. However, with all the guards, it was impossible to get inside. But since he thought Axel might be inside, Robert threw himself forward. As expected, someone stopped him. "What do you want?" "Who's in there?" Robert asked. "No one," the gatekeeper said coldly. "What are you doing here if there's no one inside?" "Just doing my job." Robert had no choice but to turn around and leave. Not long after, the police arrived. However, after the gatekeeper introduced himself, the policeman's strict manner turned into politeness. They turned around and left. Who dared to offend Dalen? He was cursing. "I'll never forgive him." Robert, who was hiding in the car, was so angry that the flesh on his face was trembling. His heart was trembling with fear. He knew Dalen's ferocious nature, but he realized that if he were to fight with Dalen, he would lose. This was why he could only secretly obstruct Dalen. He had to think of another way. Dalen was ruthless. If the person inside was really Axel, he definitely was in grave danger. Lucia stayed in the mansion the whole time Dalen was gone. Dalen had seen her only once since the day he sent her back, and hadn't seen her again. Lucia didn't even bother to ask the servant if Dalen had come back in the middle of the night while she was asleep. There was no point in asking. She didn't know how to face Dalen anymore. She felt that she couldn't stay in the mansion anymore. Now that the mansion had become like this, even if Dalen wasn't there, she still felt suffocated. And the company, she couldn't just ignore it. Even if she couldn't control it, she had to go lead. So the next day, Lucia went to the company. When Cole saw her come in, he was so shocked that he dropped the documents in his hands. "Am I that scary?" Lucia asked lightly. Cole picked up the documents on the floor and asked, Why are you here?" "This is my company. I can't come?" Lucia sat down in her office chair. Her body was still weak, and she could not muster up the strength to stand any longer. Cole was not in the mood to argue with her. He looked worriedly at Lucia's face and saw that she had lost a lot of weight. He had been worried for days, but except for the fact that she lost some weight, she seemed safe and sound. Lucia didn't care about Cole's reaction. She asked, "Nothing big happened at the company during the few days I was away, right?" "Nothing happened. It's still the same as before," Cole reassured her. "Is Mark here too?" Lucia asked. "Yes. Do you want to see him?" "No need. I'm just asking." Lucia thought that Dalen might have fired him in a fit of rage. Dalen had also said that if she did something wrong, he would punish her, but now it seemed as if nothing had changed. "Lucia, what happened that day?" Cole wanted to comfort her, but he needed answers. "Does everyone know about that day?" Lucia groaned. "Yes," Cole said hesitantly. Lucia couldn't imagine what kind of reaction Dalen had when he saw her and Axel, and in front of so many people. Even if she didn't love him, she was still Dalen's wife. No man would be willing to accept his wife after such humiliation. Maybe Dalen's anger was only because of his hurt ego. "Lucia, don't be too upset. It was just an accident." Cole knew that Lucia liked Axel, but he also understood that Lucia wouldn't betray Dalen. Lucia couldn't do such a thing. "I know." Lucia's long eyelashes dropped slightly, casting a shadow over her. Dalen won't see me. So does that mean Dalen did not mention divorce? Cole asked. Lucia shook her head. That's good, isn't it? He didn't mention divorce. What does that mean? He probably won't let me leave the mansion until I slowly die. No, that can't be necessary, right? Did Dalen say that? Did he have to say it? I understand even without him saying it. This? Cole thought. Are you sure? Lucia thought for a moment and asked, Did the news spread throughout the company? No. Dalen has already warned us all. No one would dare to say anything, Cole said. I want to know, who drugged me that day? Lucia couldn't ask Dalen, so she could only ask Cole. Actually, there was an accident. Tracy told her assistant to drug Mark. She wanted to force him to get married by trying to sleep with him and get pregnant. But her assistant mislaid the cup, and then you drank it. Then the mansion collapsed and you and Axel hid in the garage. Lucia really wanted to die. This was such a ridiculous situation. Who should she find to settle her score with first? Lucia wished she could chop that idiot Tracy into pieces. She walked out of the office and found Mark at the elevator. Mark was stunned. Mrs. Patrick. Lucia glanced at him coolly. You shouldn't be here now, right? Sorry, Mark said. He bowed his head so low it made him feel heavy. Lucia huffed. I bear the consequences of your little fight with Tracy. Don't you feel guilty every time you see me? Lucia asked calmly and mercilessly. Without Mr. Patrick's permission, I cannot leave this place. Although he had let Lucia down, Mark did not have the right to leave on his own accord. He also hoped that he could do something for Lucia. Tracy had already received her retribution, so there would never be another acting job for her ever again. Lucia paused and asked, Where is Dalen? Mark was confused. At work? Then where does he sleep at night? Lucia asked. Maybe he's sleeping in his office? Mark shrugged. This conversation was less than helpful. Then get back to work. With that, Lucia left. She was suddenly frightened. Could all this be the calm before the storm? She understood Dalen's ruthlessness too well. Lucia didn't even dare to think like that. She couldn't even think about Axel. Robert's house was in chaos, especially Catherine, who was worried to the point that she didn't even want to eat. Victoria, who was always by her side consoling her, said, Auntie, Axel will be fine. He might have gone off to do some business. He'll be back in 2 days. What is he going to do that he can't call or text? I can't even get through to his phone. I was thinking, do you think he's in trouble? Catherine paled when she thought of this possibility. Tears kept streaming down her face. Auntie, it can't be. How could something happen to him? Don't scare yourself. Victoria didn't know how to comfort Catherine. She couldn't even convince herself. However, she couldn't just watch as Catherine got so upset. Try calling again and see if you can get through, Catherine instructed the servant beside her. The servant ran to the phone, and after the call was over, he said, It's still not working. Catherine could not stop crying. Just when Victoria was at a loss, Robert returned. Robert looked at Catherine with disdain and said, What's the point of crying? You think that will bring him back? What are you saying? Isn't he your son too? You should cry. No matter how cruel Catherine could be, Axel was still her son. How could she not be grieving? Did I say he wasn't my son? If crying was useful, then everyone should just stay here and cry. Robert was furious. Catherine didn't dare to cry anymore as she sobbed softly. Robert suppressed his anger and said to Victoria, Come to my study room. Victoria was stunned. She didn't know why Robert wanted to see her alone. When Robert headed towards the study room, she followed him. After entering the study room, Robert's angry expression turned into a serious one as he frowned. Seeing that, Victoria asked, "Did something happen to Axel?" She didn't want to ask, and she didn't want an answer, but if nothing had happened, why would Robert show such an expression? "I can't find him, but I think I know where he is. I don't know what he did, but Dalen imprisoned him." "What? Dalen?" Victoria was stunned. How could this be? She couldn't imagine what kind of trouble Axel might be in. "Lucia was with her friends at the party that day, and I don't know what happened. The mansion was blown up, and no one was hurt except Axel." Robert told her the situation. Could it be? Victoria was shocked. "I was thinking the worst in the beginning, but when I looked around the collapsed mansion, I couldn't find any trace of him. After that, I followed Dalen and found out he was imprisoning someone." Maybe it's someone else. Victoria still favored Dalen in her heart. "I don't have a clue, but tell me directly, other than Dalen, who else would want to make Axel suffer?" Robert asked. This caused Victoria to be speechless, because it was the truth. No one would dare mess with their family. "Did you call me in to get information on Dalen?" Victoria was an intelligent person, so she immediately guessed what was going on. "Yes, originally I wanted to go to Linda for this matter, but Linda protects her son. Even if she knew that Dalen was in the wrong, she wouldn't care. Victoria, you're so smart, you can definitely help. Think of it as a favor." Robert slowed down his tone and pleaded. "Robert, don't say it like that. This is Axel. I am also worried about him, so I am naturally willing to do this. Don't worry." Victoria agreed, but she hesitated on the inside. Of course, this didn't mean that she didn't investigate Axel's whereabouts. However, it would be difficult to even get close to him. She couldn't just run over and ask Dalen if Axel's disappearance had anything to do with him. She just needed to be careful. She had once loved Dalen, so it would seem normal for her to visit. When Lucia returned to the mansion, her heart skipped a beat when she saw someone in the hall. However, when she saw it was Victoria, she was disappointed. Victoria was stunned when she saw Lucia. How had she lost so much weight? Victoria walked forward to see Lucia clearly and realized that she wasn't mistaken. Lucia had really lost weight. "Why is it that you have lost a lot of weight?" Victoria asked deliberately. Lucia couldn't be bothered with her. She asked, "What are you doing here?"